I just read this article that has me super triggered right now. I'm so annoyed. Now, you can see what it is on the screen. It says it's this site, How I Value My Life, and it's about HIV in the African American community. Now, I have no idea how I got here. I was researching and I don't know. I was looking at all kinds of stuff. I ended up seeing a statistic that I thought was interesting about African Americans in the family makeup or a household makeup. And I just went down a rabbit hole of research, I guess, and I found this site. I'm going to explain to you in a second why this has me so triggered. All right. So again, the site is called howivaluelife.org. I've never seen it before a day in my life before today. Their chart brought me here. I wanted more details, more context to the chart. So as you can see here, it says African Americans are the racial group most affected by HIV in the United States. Okay, simple fact or simple statement. Now, they started off talking about race, and I actually didn't read this. I actually went straight to the graph and read a little bit further on. But this is important right here. This part right here. All of it's important to what they're trying to say. But I'm going to read some of this. What is racism? Racism is a system in which people are valued differently because of their race. The system does so by unfairly disadvantaging some individuals and communities, provides unearned advantage to other individuals and communities, damages the whole society because human resources get wasted when all people are not treated as valuable and supported and fully contributing to society. Racism is not just a way to describe how individual people see one another. So I'm going to stop here. Yeah, I might as well read it all. A white person may have many friends of different races and have never harmed another person on purpose because of their race. However, that person still benefits from a system that has, for many generations and in many ways, put a higher value on the lives of white people than people of color. Quote from the Wells Project. Now, why is an article about HIV in the African American community talking about racism? Now, if you notice, they intentionally define racism as a system. And this is, this is kind of getting a little bit into why I'm bothered by this. People are refusing to recognize the difference between a person, an individual, having racist thoughts or feelings versus a system that they believe is racist. They're not the same thing. And it bothers me when people try to limit racism to a system when it's convenient. Racism is a prejudice based on race. It's not tied to a system. It can be tied to a system, but it's not automatically tied to a system. So that's not even the point of this article. But that's kind of important for what this video is going to be about. So I figured I'd share that. So they talk about HIV. They talk about racism and the effect it has on people. Obviously, African Americans in this case. Now it talks about privilege. This is an article about HIV. So it talks about privilege. Privilege is a set of unearned and often invisible benefits experienced by people who, based on aspects of their identity, fit into social groups that have power. White, race, middle to upper class, male, heterosexual, undocumented, citizen, native English speaker, to name a few. It's interesting because there are other privileges that people have that aren't based on white heterosexual males, such as the fact that women statistically serve less jail time than males for committing the same exact crime. That's a privilege. That women being taken more seriously for rape accusations than men. Men that say that they were raped get laughed at a lot of times. That's a privilege. That's a female privilege. Women can hit men without suffering, without the likelihood of being hit back by it, because women can hit men with a decreased likelihood of them being hit back simply because they're female. That's a privilege. All right, that's not even the whole point either. So I don't want to get all into that. But my whole point is there's all kind of privileges. People choose to like some and ignore others. That's a whole other story. Intersectionality, I'm just going to skip that. That's not relevant. So maybe it is to them. Intersectionality is the idea that many parts of a person's identity impact their life at the same time. Some of those aspects give them privilege. Some lead them to experience oppression. The part of a person's identity cannot be separated. For example, all women experience sexism. I'm not going to say, but the sexism that black women and white women experience will be different because black women experience sexism that is also defined by racism. The Wells Project. Is it possible for men to experience? I'm not going. No, let's keep going. Thus, in order to provide the best possible care, services, and support, it is imperative that care providers, the government, and other connected systems take intersectionality into account when studying HIV. Now, this is what I really want to talk about. As stated by the Wells Project, the differences in our experiences, the learning edges of power and oppression, privilege and vulnerability can, for our extraordinarily diverse HIV community, be a source of strength themselves. All right, so let's just go down to the nitty-gritty. So this is what I saw. I did a Google search on HIV and I saw this, and this is what brought me to the site. And I'm not going to read all of this. You have the website up here at the top of the screen. So I'm not going to read all of this, but there is something that I want to read their causes for why this is, because they go into more detail. But as you can see, you have in 2005, this is just 2005 new diagnosis of HIV. 45% of the new diagnoses were African Americans, 27% whites, 24% Latinos, and then you have some really, really small percentages here. Where's the other thing? So then they have, let me zoom in here. I'm sorry, I should have zoomed in. I forgot that I'm capturing my screen. Whoa, too much. All right, so basically here's the breakup, and I'm kind of neglecting these people, the minors, but 45% of new HIV cases in 2015 were African Americans, 27% white, 24% Latino. All right, so there's a better view. Now let's take a look at this one, which actually I didn't notice when I first came to the site because I wasn't looking for it. And this is the number of transgender men. What in the world? I'm guessing because this is about HIV and it doesn't say anything here, I'm guessing that this is AIDS among this group. All right. This isn't relevant. I'm going to skip it because I don't know what I'm talking about at this point. This isn't relevant to the conversation, but you can look at it. There's no way in the world that 58% of transgenders are black. So that's why I think 58% of okay, this is the total percentage of transgender men. And 58% of the sex cases amongst transgender men were African American. All right, okay, so that makes more sense. All right, that makes more sense. And then here's the one for women. Now, what I really wanted to make this video about was where they get into the reasons for the high HIV rate among blacks. Black MSM. What is that? I don't even know what MSM is. Where's it at? Doesn't say. Oh, men's sex with men. Okay, so yeah. Okay, so I should have read some more. All right, I'm going to blow this up. What this chart is saying, according to this up here, is these are the stats of homosexual men or men that have sex with men. You know, I guess that's the same thing. So, HIV diagnosis was the highest in 2015 among gay men, and then the second highest was white gay men. The third highest was Hispanic Latino gay men. And then there's black heterosexual women, black heterosexual men, heterosexual Latinas, heterosexual white women. So what's here at the top? Now, okay, the main theme of this video, I guess I should tell you now, because this right here shows a good point of it. I want you to see in this article how little they acknowledge choice in the things that contribute to the African American community's plight. Because what you see here, you see that basically the top three, by far, not even close, the top three categories of new HIV diagnoses in 2015 were all of these, it's all gay men. So in 2015, and I'm sure it'll be the same actually for every year, gay homosexual men contract AIDS at a significantly higher rate than heterosexuals. So, you know, this isn't even a gay bash or anything. This is a side note, but it kind of proves a point at the same time. This is a choice. People don't have to sleep. Men don't have to sleep with men. Women don't have to sleep with women. Even if it feels natural to them. I'm not saying that it doesn't feel natural to them. To most of them, it feels natural, obviously, because they do it. My whole point is that's a choice. Now, you can argue on like if it's an okay choice, if they're justified in doing it or not. That's not my point. My whole point is that's a decision. Really, just like if a man has sex with a woman, it's a choice. You don't have to have sex with them. You can not have sex with nobody. It's a hard choice. Very hard. But it's still a choice. Now, this is what triggered me right here. Contributing factors to high HIV rates in Black Americans. Now, I'm going to zoom this in. I don't know how well this is going to show up in the video, so I'm just going to zoom in and scroll. Institutionalized racism. Black people are equal on paper, but the same can't be said in practice. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. All right, there you go. Changing laws hasn't done enough to undo almost 400 years of oppression that has led to countless disadvantages that Black people have to overcome every day. HIV impacts Black populations disproportionately because the majority don't have adequate access to the tools to prevent and treat the disease. So it's saying that a majority of Black people don't have access to the tools to prevent HIV and treat HIV. Through policies and procedures, institutionalized racism creates a system that implicitly and sometimes explicitly disadvantages people of color. Now, just think about that. It's saying that because of the system, Black people don't have the same resources to protect themselves from HIV. What do you need to protect yourself from HIV? Well, okay, so obviously one of them is education. You got to know what it is and that sort of thing. And the other thing would be condoms, right? Those are the basics. I mean, there's more out there than that, but obviously you have abstinence, you have condoms, and you have, what's the other one I just said? Education, right? So they're saying that Black people don't have access to the education to know about HIV. And they may go into that in more detail somewhere. They're saying that Black people don't have access to condoms, enough access to condoms to prevent HIV. And they're saying that they don't, I don't know, whatever. What's the other one? Education, condoms, and I'm an idiot. Abstinence. They don't have, they have access, Black people have access to all of that. Right? If you got a cell phone, if you got a, I mean, I'm not even going into that yet. You know what? Let's dig into that right now. So, these people, how do they come to the conclusion that most, and that is the word they use. They said most. Where does it say somewhere? Or the majority, same thing, most. The majority don't have adequate access to the tools to prevent and treat the disease. How the heck are you going to say a majority of Black people don't have access to condoms? Like, who do you know that don't have, like, come on now, really? Seriously, though. Seriously. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. That is a gross generalization, and it should be insulting to Black people to hear this. they're going to say, come on now, like every black person I know got a name brand kicks. Every black person I know got a smartphone. Most of them got better phones than me. Cars. That's like, where are you getting this from? And I'll tell you where they're getting it from. And I'll tell you after we go through all of these. In education, it's 2018 now, dog. Like, if they can know who Cardi B is, if a black person can know who Lil' Kim is, if Jay-Z or Beyonce or LeBron James, there's nothing stopping them from going online and looking to see what HIV is. And so now I have seen some people that were adults and apparently were very ignorant of sexual education. So, but that is a terrible minority. Even if you say the schools don't adequately teach on it, everybody has access to the internet, just about. If you don't have access to the internet, you have access to schools and libraries. Like, you have access. I'm not trying to hear that. This day and age, you can literally learn about anything you want. Now, the other thing I forgot to mention is testing. There are places that will give you free testing. Matter of fact, I'm going to Google it right now. I'm going to Google free HIV. So, in Philadelphia, where I live at, let's see how many places you can go to get free testing. Well, according to this, it's free. Maybe there is a price somewhere, but let's just start with this. The following public facilities provide residents of Philadelphia with free or low-cost STD tests. Philadelphia AIDS Consortium, Access Matters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I've counted 20 places, all right? I've counted 20 places in Philly, and there's a couple more. So, and like, you can go. If you want to know about HIV, there's literally nothing stopping any black person from learning about HIV. So it's not access to information. And I would even venture to say that even just in school, they tell you about it. Everybody has access to the internet and all that stuff. So, and then in terms of condoms don't cost that much. All right. I can't remember the exact price because it's been a minute. All right. But I'm just saying, condoms don't cost that much. And if you don't have money for condom, you cannot tell me that you can't go get one from a brother or cousin or a sister, anybody. You're going to tell me that they don't have access to condoms? All right? This is a joke. And this is there's a reason why this bothers me. Let's go back to the study here. Oh, this is a different study. So we went over I talked about condoms. I talked about education. Abstinence. Like, abstinence is very difficult, especially in this society today where people get pressured to have sex. But it's still an option. It's a power of choice that a person has. And you may say, oh man, ain't nobody going to do that. There are people who are abstinent, right? So it's like that is the most powerful thing right there. Outside of all of the other resources, you ultimately have the power and the ability to choose. Now, doesn't mean that, obviously nobody's perfect. Doesn't mean that you're going to have an iron will and never slip up. But you can't just ignore the power of choice. And that is why I have a problem with this article. As you'll see, nowhere in here will they acknowledge the fact that there are black people, probably a high amount of black people, probably most black people, contract HIV because they knew the risks and they didn't protect themselves. All right? Just like pregnancy. So let's go on to the next reason. And you notice this. They have all these things here. They won't mention, you can see here, I'm just going to read them off. Poverty, health disparities, Medicaid obstacles, sexual networks, exaggeration of the low down brother. We got to read that. Homophobia in the church. How does this lead to HIV? Where, at what point, where is the section that talks about choice? we've surveyed X amount of people, and X amount of people said they knew the risks, but they didn't think it would happen to them, quote. So let's go back and read each one. Let's go to poverty, because we already read the first one. 28% of black people are living in poverty compared to the national average of 15.9%. So question, if poverty, let me stop. I'm just going to keep going. 28.1% of black people are living in poverty compared to the national average. This is in part due to the fact that African Americans tend to have less opportunity than other white counterparts. Often living in poverty means a lack of education, decreased access to health care, increased risk of substance abuse and homelessness, and increased likelihood of engaging in sex work as a source of income. All of these factors decrease the risk of acquiring HIV. Now, when it comes to these things here, I'm not even going to argue against any of, except for the first one. Well, we'll see about the other ones. But my whole idea here, it isn't to try to debunk the idea of systematic oppression, even though I don't agree with that. That's not the point. The whole point is I want to show you how little they value the power of choice or the capacity to make choice of black people. So institutional racism, let's assume for the sake of, let's say, okay, there is systematic racism. Again, I already talked about the things that we all have access to. Poverty, so a lot of black people live in poverty and it causes other problems. Okay, granted. Health disparities. Health disparities may. Now, anytime you read something that's supposed to be scientific or breaking down, now this doesn't claim to be necessarily scientific. It's not really that detailed, but anytime you listen to something that trying to prove a point, and it uses words like may and most likely and probably, that means that they're just speculating. But anyway, health disparities may exist according to gender, race, education, or income level, disability, sexual orientation, region, and more. Social determinants of health, the social realities that have an impact on a person's physical health, like poverty, lack of education, and racism, are linked to the health disparities. HIV-related health disparities are the biological expression of social inequalities. HIV-related health disparities are the biological expression of social inequalities, unequal or unjust conditions. Notice they attributed it's like what do you call it? The reason for it, my brain is going blank right now. What in the world? They attribute it solely to health disparities or social inequalities. They take into account they're not holding people accountable for choices at all. And what about the white people that have HIV? If HIV-related health disparities are the biological expression of social inequalities, what about the white people that have it? So it's like Medicaid obstacles. Medicaid is the single largest source of coverage for people with HIV in the U.S. However, a Supreme Court decision ruled that Medicaid expansion under the ACA, American Affordable Care Act, can only be available to uninsured people living in the states that choose to implement it. As a result, 20 states have opted out of Medicaid, leaving an estimated 8.5 million uninsured Americans who would have qualified for full Medicaid countries. In those states, Black Americans are twice as likely to be insured and more than six times as likely to have HIV. So now you're going to blame it on Medicaid? Really? Most notably in the Deep South, 9 states with the highest rates of HIV/AIDS have chosen not to expand Medicaid. Now, Medicaid has nothing. This is talking about people that have it already. So obviously, people that have it already, and since as of now it's supposedly incurable, This doesn't prevent other people from getting it. Okay, but maybe it can greatly reduce the infectivity or that sort of things. I don't know. I've never studied that. But this is for people who have had it already. This has nothing to do with people who are getting it, as far as I'm concerned. This still doesn't account for people who choose. What about the people who choose to have sex knowing there's a chance that they can contract the disease from this other person? Sexual networks. Black Americans are known to be less likely to have relationships outside their race. Only 19% of Black Americans report to having sexual relations with people of other races. Given the population size, once the Black community was exposed to HIV, it spread quicker, and the negative impact was and continue to be greater. Black people who choose other Black partners are more likely to come in contact with someone who is HIV positive than people of other races who date outside their race. This is especially true in the LGBTQ communities of Black Americans. 25% of gay and bisexual men and 50%, gosh, of Black transgender women are testing positive for HIV, compared to 0.06% of the general population. Goodness, that's high. It's almost like being homosexual is a bad thing. Now, here's the thing. Most white people don't date outside their race either. Most white people date other white people. So let me ask you a question. Whoever's listening to this, let me ask you a question. According to the statistics that this study or report or whatever you want to call it, article, according to the statistics that they've shown, according to this right here, which talks about the dramatic increase of the likelihood that you'll catch HIV by having sex with a Black person. Could you call someone racist for saying, I don't want to sleep with a Black person? I don't want to date a Black person because the risk of HIV. Now, if you said that, I guarantee you the person who wrote this article will call you a racist. But look at the picture they're painting here. If you were to say that statistically, based on, we're going to go back up to it, based on this right here, that the largest population of Black, whites, and Hispanics, the largest population in all of them are homosexuals. So if someone says homosexuality is bad for you because it dramatically increases the risk of you contracting a disease, HIV particularly, would this person call you a homophobe? They probably will call you a homophobe, even though, according to their statistics, you're taking a terrible risk. Look at this. Black heterosexual men is at 2,000. Black gay men is at 10,000. That is ridiculous. You're 5 times more likely to catch AIDS if you're a Black male than you are if you are a gay male than if you are a straight male. And it's the same for all of them. Look at this. This is ridiculous. So but again, if someone was to argue and say, hey, based on the data that I found here, it is incredibly risky and unsafe for you to live a homosexual lifestyle, what would these people say? Oh, they'd probably say you're a racist, you're a bigot. It's your privilege that allows you to say that. Exaggeration of the low down brother. I gotta read this. Down low, not low down. Down low is a concept rooted in homophobia that leads to misguided assumptions about HIV in Black communities. What? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. First of all, down low how is it a concept rooted in homophobia? It's rooted in the fact that people, wait, let me read it again before I misrepresent them. Rooted in homophobia that leads to misguided assumptions about HIV. This is insane. This is insane. It says that leads to misguided assumptions about HIV in Black communities. As stated by HIV Plus magazine, studies have shown that the majority of Black men who have had sex with men do identify as gay or bisexual, and those who don't are less likely to be HIV positive, have multiple male sex partners, or have engaged in unprotected anal intercourse in the past 6 months. The down low concept implies that being gay or bisexual is something to be ashamed of, and it assumes that you are an HIV positive man that if you are an HIV positive man who identifies as heterosexual, you must be lying about your sex partners. Oh my gosh, this is what irks me so bad about this. Oh man, I almost cussed right. This is what irks me so bad about liberalism. All they do is reinterpret stuff to take away the fact that people make choices that are bad. Down low, anyone, if you black and you're reading this, you know what down low is. Down low is a dude who likes to sleep with men who pretend that he doesn't. It's not a stereotype. It's not a homophobia. It's the idea that people do that. And they do that. What are you talking about? It says, studies have shown that the majority of black men who have sex with men do identify as gay or bisexual, and those who don't are less likely to be HIV positive, have multiple male sex partners, or have engaged in unprotected anal intercourse in the past 6 months. What's wrong with it? The down low concept implies that being gay or bisexual is something to be ashamed of. No, it doesn't. It implies that you're being dishonest to the woman that you're sleeping with. That's what it implies. It implies that you're pretending to be one thing and you're really something else. Now, if you want to say that the black community looks down on homosexuality or society in general, that's your right to say so. That's your right to believe so. But that is not what down low means. And it bothers me when people continually reinterpret stuff as a way to not hold people accountable for their choices. Additionally, if you are an HIV positive woman, then you must have had sex with a man who wasn't honest about his sexual partners, which eliminates the possibility of bisexuality making the woman of the victim, and void of the ability to empower herself and require protection during sex. See, oh my gosh, I'm at a loss for words right now. Because the implications, how is it that they see the implications of this particular situation, but they do not see the implications that they are complaining about here that they are making about the entire black community? This is what liberals do. Anytime they talk about, oh, dear black man, dear black woman, oh, it's the system, it's the government, it's education, it's your income. Anytime that they make the problem everything but you, they are literally doing the same thing that they are saying that people were doing in this instance. If you are an HIV positive woman, then you must have had sex with a man who wasn't honest about his sexual partners. Now, here's the thing. First of all, statistically, who are they most likely to contract it from? Even if somebody does make that assumption, who are they most likely to contract it from? Even the women are far. Let's look at that list again. Heterosexual women, Where's black, gay, white gay, Latino gay, black heterosexual women, black heterosexual men, Hispanic, Latino. They don't have gay women on here unless I'm stupid. Heterosexual. They don't even have it on here. Why? Let me read this again in case I'm slow. Y'all should see me. I'm like 2 inches from the screen because I feel like I'm missing something. Black, gay, white, gay, Hispanic, Latino, gay, males. Black heterosexual woman, black heterosexual man, Hispanic heterosexual woman, white heterosexual woman. They don't have gay Latinas, they don't have gay whites, and they don't have gay females. Why is that? That's weird. Why do they not show that? All right, anyway. So, which eliminates the possibility of bisexuality and makes the woman the victim and void of the ability to empower herself and require protection during sex. So basically what they're saying is, if you shift all of the blame onto a DL dude, then you're taking the woman of her ability to empower herself, because you're saying that it happened all without her control. First of all, regardless of who she has sex with, a woman has the power, the ability, she has the power of choice. She can choose to not sleep with anybody. She can choose to sleep with only people that she knows are tested. She can, you can go with the person or whatever. She can choose to only sleep with one person, which it doesn't automatically guarantee you, but it decreases the risk. She can choose to not have sex without protection. But because they assume that, wait a minute, so hold on a second. So, makes the woman the victim and void of the ability to empower herself and require protection during sex. Okay, I thought she was, so let me ask you this. If the black community is void of the resources to protect themselves, how can she require a man to protect himself? You just said that the black people don't have, the majority. You said the majority of black people don't have access to the proper protection. So how is she going to protect herself anyway? This is ridiculous. But again, the whole idea that making someone else accountable for this, you're saying you're taking all the responsibility off the woman, and by taking away responsibility, you're taking away power. That is exactly what every liberal argument does. That is exactly how liberals treat the black community. They treat the black community like we have no say in the matter, that things just happen to us. We just take it lying down, and we don't have the mental capacity to decide. This entire article is doing it. This entire article takes away the power of black people by saying you don't have a choice. This was done to you, and there's literally nothing you can do about it. Am I recording? Yeah, I am. Homophobia in the church. 87% of black people identify as religious. As prescribed by the HIV Plus magazine, in the face of racial discrimination and hatred, the black church has always provided a sense of togetherness and belonging. However, when a black person comes out as LGBTQ, many churches don't provide the same support. Religious black Americans continue to make up a large portion of anti-gay America. Homosexuals are often equated to demons in church. When preachers give homophobic sermons after church, no one talks about it but to LGBTQ people. No one talks about it, but to LGBTQ people, it can be very damaging. Unfortunately, the reality is that black, gay, and bisexual men and transgender women are in a state of emergency when it comes to HIV/AIDS, but they don't have the full support of the black community. See, you're blaming the church. Think about this. 87% of black people identify as religious, which means that a portion, at least a small portion, and I would say even more than a small portion of the people, the transgenders and the gay and bisexual men, even they're religious. Not all of them, but a lot of them are religious. So, I mean, what? If the Bible, if their religion says something is wrong, how are they going to support these people? They're supposed to tell them it's okay? Now, I could agree that everyone should have some kind of support or some kind of person who cares about you in your corner. I can agree with that. However, you cannot dismiss the idea of religion, because what religion is for most people is their understanding of how they connect with God. That's important. You can't just say, oh, because religion disapproves of it, then they're wrong. Or like, oh, they're supposed to change their religion because people are making choices to have sex with people and they contract HIV. I mean, obviously people can be raped or other things can happen to you. I'm not saying that that's not the case. But this is, again, it treats people, especially it's treating these gay people, the bisexual people, all of this. This entire article is designed to say that black people are in this situation because they don't have a choice. And then they get down to the HIV positive woman and says she does have a choice. So what's stopping if the HIV positive woman, or excuse me, if a woman has the power to demand protection during sex, what's stopping the gay men from demanding protection during sex? Because gay men is the highest demographic. This article is stupid, and it goes going out of your way to make excuses for people. Now, I'm not saying that things don't happen. I'm not saying that the system is perfect. I'm not trying to argue none of that. But what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, you control what you can control. And what you can always control is yourself. We all make choices. Sometimes they're difficult choices, but we all make choices. And to write an article like this, basically saying that everything that happens to black people is outside of their control, is disempowering. It's not being empowering. It's not being loving. It's not being supportive. So to me, that kind of thing is actually more racist than the KKK guy who stands out there and yells slurs, because this one is masquerading as humility and support. It's masquerading as like caring about somebody, but the whole time you're telling that person that they have no power. The whole time you're telling the person that they are unable to change their destiny. So that's the end of the article right there. There's a couple more things I wanted to look at, and one is the same stat, but from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention for 2016. So what we looked at was for 2015, and when you look at the chart for 2016, it is exactly the same. Wait a minute, was that 2016 or 15? Let me look. 2015. All right. So yeah, so 2016, it's the same. It's the same. You have the highest by a far margin. It's not even close. HIV diagnoses diagnoses in 2016 among gay people, black, male to male, Latino male to male, white male to male. They are it's the same as the year before. Now let me ask you a question. If you want to talk about white privilege and in the system and all of that, why is the Hispanic and Latino thing virtually the same for this year? Let's see how it is on the other year. This one was even worse than Latinos. So explain it. How is it that white gay males suffer from homosexuality, suffers from HIV more than black heterosexual men and women, and Latinas rather. So why don't they? This is weird. They don't have everything here, but so much for white privilege. White gays suffer more than Latinos, or this is kind of the same, but they have it worse than black heterosexual women, worse than black heterosexual men. So if the whole problem is that they don't have access to the resources and all of that stuff, why is there such a discrepancy between the straight heterosexual men and why is there such a discrepancy between the heterosexuals and the homosexuals? Come on now, you can't do this. This should be a big red flag. But when you live in a culture where you can't call a spade because it's discriminatory, or you're so quick to be called a homophobe and all that kind of stuff, then you can't really deal with the problem. You want to make this article talking about how black people don't have resources when white homosexuals and Latino homosexuals is further up than the straight black people. What a joke. It's not a joke. It makes me mad. So 2016 was the same exact thing. There's no need to go through all this because it's literally the same as what I went through in the other one. So much for white privilege. Like black heterosexuals are safer from HIV. well, just from this right here, not safer, but they contracted it less than white gays. So does this mean that white males are lacking the resources and lacking the medical care and all that other nonsense? You wouldn't say that. You would say, no, they made choices or something like that. But see, there's something called it's something called the bigotry of soft expectations. If you would look at this white male-to-male number and you look at the black male-to-male number and you say, well, it's different for the whites, they should have known better. What are you saying about the black people? You're disempowering them, just like you talked about the HIV positive woman. You're disempowering people when you act like they don't have a choice. If anything, the worse things are for them, the worse the system is, the worse racism is, or whatever. All the things that you believe have an effect on a person and that can hurt them. The more you think the world is dangerous, the more you ought to be challenging that individual to have more control over the things that they can. They have to be extra careful. That doesn't mean that you don't try to change the system if you believe it's wrong, but you have to go to that person. Like, for example, if I believed that the police were hunting black men, then I'm going to tell black men, yo, do you know how the police are? Control yourself. Do not do nothing stupid. Don't do anything to get involved with them. Don't run. Don't fight. I'm going to tell them to exhibit more control because of the things that are out of their control. Like, that's just how you do it. When you care about people, that's how you do. And furthermore, when you actually believe in people, when you believe that people have power, you challenge them to be accountable. You hold them to a higher standard. All of this nonsense of blaming the problems and not holding the person accountable, that's a sign that you do not believe in them. That's a sign that you don't believe in their power. So I want to wrap this up by looking at two scriptures talking about accountability. This one is Galatians 6. Galatians 6, starting in chapter 1. Let me make this bigger here. Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor. For each will have to bear his own load. My dog is going crazy. Calm down. So basically, this is talking about accountability. This is talking about a lot of things here. It's talking about helping each other and all of that. But what I wanted to focus on is accountability. Accountability. It says, keep watching yourself, lest you too are not tempted. It's talking about let each one test his own work, and then each one will have to bear its own load. Now, this is talking about a spiritual thing, obviously. What the animals are acting weird. So it's taught everyone is going to be accountable for themselves before God. You can't get to God, you can't go before God and be like, oh, the system, dog. Like, come on, God, the system was system was holding me down. I had to do this. Like, it don't work like that. And then the other one, I want to go to Genesis because this is very telling. Genesis 3. Now the serpent was more crafty than any other beast of the field that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, did God actually say, you shall not eat of any tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, you should not eat the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden. Neither shall you touch it, lest you die. My voices are horrible. Anyway. But then the serpent said to the woman, you should not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise. She took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. And then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. So, the woman knew what she was supposed to do. The woman knew what she was supposed to do. The man knew what he was supposed to do. They chose to listen to the serpent and to listen to their eyes. And they made a choice to disobey God. And then they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man and said to him, "Where are you?" And he said, "I heard you. I heard the sound of your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself." He said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I have commanded you not to eat?" The man said, "The woman whom you gave to me, she gave me the fruit of the tree, and I ate." Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." So here you go. So God comes along. Why are you hiding? And the man, Adam says, I'm about to say Abraham. What in the world? The man, he says, "I heard you and I was afraid because I was naked. I hid myself." He said, "Who told you were you naked? Have you eaten of the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" Does Adam own up to it, or does he shift the blame? He says, "The woman who you gave to be with me, she gave me the fruit of the tree and I ate." Why would he blame her? Because he's trying to take responsibility off himself. So what did she do? Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is it that you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." So why is she blaming the serpent? Because she's trying to take responsibility away from herself. When you shift the blame from someone else, you're saying that you didn't have the power in yourself, that someone else is responsible. So then does God accept that from them? Was the woman genuinely deceived? Apparently she was. Did the woman give Adam the fruit? Yeah, she did. Does that make him, he was right there with her, like, does that make him, because somebody did something bad to them, does that exonerate them from their personal responsibility? No. It don't work like that. Look, when you read the Bible, there are civilizations that raise up their kids into wickedness. They raise up their kids into wicked, evil, perverse practices. And those people who were raised up in that system were held accountable. God didn't go to them and say, "Oh, well, you were raised that way. That wasn't your fault. The system was an evil system and you grew up in it." No, he held them accountable. Because the Bible actually says that every man knows better. All that worshiping other gods and all that stuff. The Bible says everybody knows, but every single person knows better. But the whole point is, that's not how God looks at things. So the world can try to play that whole blame game and shift the blame, but God does not do that. God does not accept that. It is not appropriate. It's not appropriate for believers. So get this whole victim mentality. It's incompatible with being a Christian. It is. So that's the end of my video. Thank you for taking the time to watch. And if you find this useful to you, then please like it, please share it, please comment. And thank you.